When I was 15, my parents decided to visit my uncle. I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay home and spend time with my best friend Alex. Since we lived in a quiet neighborhood and there was little crime, my parents allowed me to stay home and invite Alex. My mom left a note on the fridge with all the emergency numbers, and my dad told me to call her if anything happened. I assured them that everything will be fine. Me and Alex were gonna play video games and eat pizza. Later I called Alex and he came to my house. 15 minutes later we played UFC on my PS4 for 2 hours, then we ate pizza. After dinner, we sat in the living room to talk about things and other things. Eventually, we started talking about girls. Alex mentioned a website where you can talk to random people. It was called Omegle. He also said he had talked to girls on this site, so we decided to go on Omegle and try our luck. For the first 30 minutes we were put in contact with new girls. We were starting to get bored, and just as I was moving my mouse to close the web page, 2 girls appeared on our screen. They were about our age, maybe a little older. We tried to talk to them, but they were just typing. We could see they were trying to talk, but we couldn't hear them. We told them to turn on their microphones, but the girls said they didn't have one. We kept talking to them anyway. We said we were home alone, and apparently they were too. They said they lived in the same city as us and in the same neighborhoods. But we had never seen these girls before. I thought it was strange because our town was quite small. After another 15 minutes, they told us that we were super cute, and that we should go out someday. We were stunned. Usually girls don't want to date us, so Alex gave them a Snapchat username. As soon as he typed in his username, the girls disconnected. We were really disappointed, we didn't even get their name. So we turned off my laptop and went back to the PS4 to play video games. A little later, we were still playing video games when Alex pulled out his phone. He had just received a snap from someone called Anaxosu99. He opened it, and it was a picture of the 2 girls we had met on Honglei a little earlier. They were walking down the street and the legend said, "We can come to your house, be dragged." Alex looked at me and didn't ask me anything. I already knew what he wanted and I already said no. They weren't really happy, but they understood at the same time. I texted them to tell them they couldn't come and we should spend time together. But another time, a few minutes later, the girls said we can meet at the park, so Alex asked me if I wanted to go to the park with them. It was only a 10-minute walk from my house, but I still said no at the time. Alex was a little frustrated, and he said he would go with or without me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I should go. Would I really pass up an opportunity like this? I looked at my watch and it was 10:30, but it wasn't that late and my dad's friend lived right next door to the park, so I said I'd go with him. But if anything seemed strange, we would immediately return to my place. Alex agreed. He sent the girls a snap saying we were on our way to the park. They said they would be waiting for us at the children's playground. We're out of my house and they're going to start walking to the park the whole way. I was thinking, and if anything ever goes wrong, we don't even know these girls. What if someone else was in the park with her? But I didn't want to say anything because Alex would probably say I was paranoid. So I kept my thoughts to myself. After 10 minutes of walking, we arrived at the park. The children's playground was a little further in the park. So I asked Alex to ask them to come to the main entrance of the park because that's where we were. But Alex just said, "Man, come on," and texted them to say we were at the park. After about a minute we got to the playground. There was still no one. I asked Alex if they responded to our last photo and he said no, they just opened the photo. We waited a few minutes, but still no sign of the girls. We were alone in the park. I told Alex she was probably laughing at us and we should go home, but Alex wanted to stay a few more minutes. A minute passed, and that's when we heard someone walking behind us. We turned around and there was a guy dressed in black standing behind a tree looking at us. He had a frightening smile on his face. I told Alex that we should go home, that it really wasn't a good idea. Alex agreed with me and we started walking towards the house. All the while I was looking over my shoulder to try to see if the man was following us, and he was. I told Alex and he started running. Just as we got to the entrance of the park, the guy grabbed my hand and started screaming like crazy. I was screaming and kicking to try to get him to let go of my hand. I called Alex to help me, but he ran away. The guy started pulling me to the back of the park. I screamed as loud as I could, and that's when I saw blue and red lights. The guy must have seen them too, because he immediately let go of my hand and started running further into the park. I started running towards my house when a policeman stopped me. I explained everything to him, and he immediately called my parents. The police officer took me to the police station to wait for my parents to pick me up. The parents arrived after about an hour, and the policeman told them what had happened, and so did I. My dad asked if they caught the guy, and they said they were still looking for him. When we got home, my parents were happy that nothing serious had happened. But they were also furious at me for being so irresponsible. I should never have left the house to meet girls I've only been talking to online for 2 minutes. They told me to go to bed and everything would be fine. The next day, Alex came to our house. He was with his father and he apologized for running away last night. He also said that when he returned home, he had opened his Snapchat, but there was no sign of an Extortion 99. It's like she never existed. For context, I'm a teenager, and this happened when I was about 17. At the time I was seeing all these videos on YouTube about Omegle's horror stories and pranks. I'm not particularly brave, but when I'm bored, I often take drastic measures to find something to do. After thinking for a while, I found the courage to go on Omegle. I wanted to be funny, so I didn't respond to anything or anyone. Then I came across this guy who kept telling me to talk or else. But being a teenager, I wanted to make him angry. So I asked him what he would do in the cat. All he said was, "You should talk more," and he left. I'm pretty proud of myself for being a jerk, but he's mildly disturbed, so I turned it off to work on my homework due the next day. After a few minutes of work I heard my dogs barking and they wouldn't stop. Even when I asked them to do it, I thought to myself that maybe someone had made a loud noise, or maybe even someone had a whistle, a dog. After calming my dogs and going back to my homework, I heard the same noise. This time someone knocked on my back door. My back door was closed by a 3-foot barrier and a bolt. The only way someone can get in is to have a key or jump it after looking outside for about 10 minutes. I called my dad and I'm going to tell you everything. He told me when he got home, he'd take a look. I accepted him because he's a doctor and he has a lot of work to do. Half an hour passes, my dogs are outside, and that's when I hear a thud outside my door. I looked around and there was a stone with a note stuck on it. After that, I heard my dogs barking in our driveway. The word said, "I know where you live. I've never been so scared in my life. I just feel lucky to have 3 dogs in my house at all times." I'm not one to show my emotions or get scared easily, but this really scared me. I'm shaking and I'm about to call the police. Is it just a coincidence, or is it the same guy from Omegle who really found out where I live? When my friends and I were 15 years old, we often went to Omegle. I'm sure most of you already know what Omegle is, but if you don't, it's a chat site that connects you with a random person for a one-on-one conversation. You can log out and start a new conversation with someone else at any time. At the time, the site was still booming and had about 150,000 people online at any given time. We liked to have fun with people and completely invent who we were. We were young and had a bad sense of humor. One day we decided to go on Omegle and say some very weird things. That day, we decided to tell strangers that we had children locked up in our basement. For some reason it was comedy gold in our 15-year-old minds, and we thought the reactions would be hilarious. We may have told 1 or 2 strangers and they immediately disconnected. But then we connected with a stranger who was either genuinely worried about him or wanted to play the scary message game. We told this stranger our joke of the day. The stranger asked us why we were so despicable, and he was going to call the cops. We laughed and disconnected. We connected to the next stranger, and the first message that popped up was almost unbelievable. How are the kids in your basement? We were shocked and disconnected immediately. We tried to laugh about it for a few seconds and connect to another stranger, but with every connection to a new stranger, another message had appeared in the chat. I'm still waiting to hear from these kids. We decided to disconnect and reconnect once more. The last message the person sent was, I'm still here and I'm still waiting for your response. Finally we came to our senses and left the computer for a while. I remember being so scared that this person would call the cops, but thankfully nothing came of it. We stopped going on Omegle as much as possible. I'm still wondering if a moderator was on the site and had a way to keep connecting to us, or if it was someone who was good at hacking. I'm sure what we said to that person panicked him as much as he panicked us. Overall, we learned a good lesson and realized we weren't as funny as we thought we were. Some of you may have heard of this website called Omegle.com. If not, it is a chat site. People go there when they're bored and it's anonymous. It's up to you to give your information, but you can easily exit a conversation and move on to another person with a single click. Around 2012, I went to this site often because I felt lonely and I already had nice conversations on this site. I was 16 at the time and that's when I met Emily. She was a funny girl who was so easy to talk to, and right away I felt like we had been friends forever. So I gave her my Skype and all my contact information so we could talk again very quickly. We talked all day, every day for a few months on Omegle. She told me she was from Wales, which I thought was very cool. I had never met anyone from Wales, I thought. She was the best friend I ever had. We talked about everything that was going on in our lives. She would tell me crazy stories about the things she had done with her friends, and we would talk about girl stuff, and I would wake up with photoshopped pictures of us and cats, and a bad pun written on it. We were texting each other all the time, but I wanted to call her or make her a video. But she told me that she had an argument with her stepfather recently, and he threw his laptop against the wall and the camera broke. Okay, well, I thought she could send a message on Skype, and that I would turn on my video and my microphone so she could see me. Why not? When we did, she kept telling me how jealous she was of me and telling me to stop looking so beautiful, and it flattered me. I thought she was beautiful in those pictures and it was silly of her to be jealous of me. Emily was clingy. She wanted my attention all the time and got angry if I fell asleep or didn't respond fast enough. She started doing weird things to her body, like saying she thought she had an ugly vagina and was worried about it. And she was calling it a slut for the coins. It was really weird. She asked me to look at her and tell her if he was weird. To which I simply replied, no, I'm sure he's fine, don't worry. She said, I bet yours has sparkles and magic. I could feel her trying to take a picture of me. I didn't and changed the subject. Emily was talking about the guy who works at the supermarket and how she had a big crush on him and was too clumsy to tell him anything. I encouraged her to talk to him, and eventually she had the courage to ask him out the night she told me this. I remember she asked me this question out of the blue: if I were a guy, what name do you think I would have? And suddenly my heart sank when I read this, because I realized that I had never heard his voice or seen his picture in a video. She could very well have been a man all this time. Could she, however, know? She was surely just trying to scare me. She was trying to get reactions all the time. And these pictures fit everything she's talking about. I don't have to worry, do I? I decided to participate, John. Oh, I was hoping you would say Jacob. That's weird. But again, I thought she was just weird, and we kept talking about something else. I told her she almost scared me. She laughed and apologized. One evening I arrived and we were talking as usual. She asked me what state I was living in. I told her because I thought maybe she wanted to see what it looked like compared to where she lives on Google or something. Then she said, "You're only 500 miles from my house." I said, "No, you're not." She said, "Yes, I'm going to look for this school, and of course it's in Alabama. You can easily find the school on Google Maps." So I figured she made things up to get more reactions. She then said she had repaired her camera, and that we could do a video chat tonight if I wanted. I said yes. I was very excited. We had been talking for 2 months and I could finally have it. Instead of sending him pictures of texts, I sit in the living room and call him. She replied, "You know when you feel frozen by fear and time seems slow?" The first second when I saw her, I thought it might be her brother or her friend, and she was going to move the camera to her. But no, it was just him, so I froze. And without seeing, he took one of his laptops and logged in as Emily to show me that he had really been doing this all this time. He wasn't saying anything. He then pulls out a camera and points it at me. I finally told myself to end the call before he took his picture. Why did he take out his camera? I don't know. But I'm trying to take it all in while my heart is pounding. And even though he's not near me physically, it's still very scary and disturbing to me. I pulled myself together, and I decided to try to get some answers. I wrote him a simple why, and he replied to me, "My friends challenged me to pretend to be a girl on Omegle, but I thought you were really cool." So I kept going, but I stopped talking to the other guys. I just wanted to keep talking to you. And guess what? His name was Jacob. He was 21 years old and he was from Alabama. I didn't understand how she could maintain her fake Emily life every day and even have pictures of everything that seemed so legitimate. It was almost as if Emily was real and had died that night. That girl in those pictures, who was she? The strange thing is that sometimes I feel like she's still there, even though I know she doesn't exist. I am a very young woman. In 6th grade, I wasn't even stupid. I still know a little bit. So please don't give me a course on internet safety. In truth, I already know all this, but I chose to do it. I know it was a stupid decision and it will never happen again. Okay, so let's get started. I was bored over winter break and was on the tablet I got for Christmas with a Bluetooth keyboard, but didn't want to go to sleep. I remember watching many prank videos and catches on YouTube on a site called Omegle. If you don't know what Omegle is, it is a free website with a safe version for 13 and up, and another inappropriate version for inappropriate purposes. For a pedophile reason, people still prefer to go to the on version to show the thread their anaconda. This site keeps you anonymous for security reasons, and does not recommend that you give out personal information. As stupid as I was, I thought, hey, might as well talk to strangers at 00VQ. What went wrong? The answer to this question is a lot of things. I learned it the hard way, the second time in a row. I used that Omegle on January 2nd, late at night or early in the morning. I went to my interest box and entered 5 things. There were a few catalogs. When I saw a girl who said she was 13, I already knew that person was in the simulator. I should have left, but I didn't. Basically, this girl was asking me for personal information. I faked everything except my age. Shamefully. She said, "Cool, I'm 13. I'm only a year older than you." She kept pushing me to show her my naked body as she did too. Of course I refused, and of course this creepy pedophile got mad. Apparently this person had been recording me all this time on his computer. He streamed it on his screen, letting me watch myself drinking from my water bottle. An image that can easily be photoshopped in seconds to become something really inappropriate. I remember looking at her and telling him he was sick. To which he simply replied no. Being the smartest person in the world, I didn't leave the cat. Instead, I picked up my phone, kept talking to him and recorded him threatening me. He told me that if I didn't show myself indecently, he would take the recordings and show them in an inappropriate video. When I said no, he told me I had 2 choices. 1 to show me naked, or 2 to relieve his toilet fetish. When I didn't answer, he thought I didn't know what it was and told me. I didn't answer again. So he left me the following message. I guess you made your choice, so goodbye. At first I thought absolutely nothing, telling myself he wasn't smart enough to do that, and the more I thought about it, the more I panicked. I cried silently because I didn't want my father and his friend to hear me next door in his room. I posted the videos on my private Instagram, only I was allowed to see them. My only followers were people from my school I knew, so I asked for help. Only a small amount of people were online, like 2, so I spared myself some embarrassment at school, as a certain person at school saw it. The other was my 13-year-old half-sister. Val, the girl who saw it, took a screenshot and texted me asking what was wrong. I told her, and she told me to call the police. Unfortunately, I had to call the police, or fortunately. Actually, the dispatcher was very nice. But when the police arrived, the lady who was there wasn't. She lectured me, and then she left. She told me she wasn't in a position to make an arrest because I let her do all this as if I wanted her to. Of course I showed them the videos. My father said he was disappointed in me, and to make a long story short, I was punished for everything. I just got my tablet at Easter after 83 days. My broken phone and iPod are still confiscated. I hate Omegle. A year or 2 ago I was one of those guys who went on Omegle to look for sex. So yeah, I was kinda perverted. I used to chat and then talk over emails and kicks, which would normally end in sexting or something like that. I made sure they were always under 16 since I was 15 at the time. 16 years was legal where I am, and I avoided getting others into trouble. One day I found someone on Quick and we started dating. Excuse the pun. We talked a lot. I found out she was from where I lived and I was thrilled at the time. But that's when she told me she was about 22. Now, I think I may have been the biggest idiot possible and said I was 16. We talked about meeting for a while, and one day she talked about sex, so I never saw anything of it other than shirtless pictures. Which, could be honest, was not at all impressive for obvious reasons. This time I decided to send more private photos. I got pictures back and they looked pretty authentic. So we kept going, we talked some more, and one day she dropped a bomb. She said she was actually in a relationship, but they were considering a threesome as a horny teenager. I took what I could and said yes. That's when she apparently showed and shared the emails with her boyfriend. I had a lot of discussions about what was going to happen and all that, and I was pretty excited, to be honest. At that point both of them asked me if I had ever thought or done bisexual things. I was a little scared, but I just said no to the two and told them I was straight. At first they said yes, but they came back and asked me if I was sure at this point. I thought I wouldn't feel safe and uncomfortable meeting them, or even talking to them, and that's what I told them. This is where it gets scary. I was told to stop, and was inundated with mails containing lots of sexual and normal abuse. I ignored all the emails. I was scared, but I didn't think too much about it. One day I received masked text messages and calls containing the same type of abuse that had frightened me. I never gave them my number and I never told anyone about what was going on, so it was them. But how? I got text messages saying they were going to send my picture to my parents, posted it to all my friends, and they wouldn't do it only if I did what they asked me to do. I was petrified. I was going to call the police, but I thought I might get in a lot of trouble for it. I asked what they wanted. Then I found out it was just one man. All this time he said that if I didn't have sex with him, then he would do what he threatened me with. At that point I said I was underage and I would have him arrested for child pornography. He didn't believe me. I also mentioned that it was blackmail. He then threatened to hurt me and I replied, "You don't know where I live." He then showed me a road I was living on. I said he was wrong, but he didn't let himself be convinced. I ignored everything for a good month, voluntarily took long trips home from school. And I never went out on my own. I locked everything in my house when I was alone, deleted my emails, cut up my SIM card, and made sure I never had long hair again so he wouldn't recognize me. I lived in fear for about 6 months before recovering. I only told a handful of close friends just to be safe. It just goes to show that you can't trust anyone online, and it's not wise to be there for the reason I was there. Especially when you are a minor. No one really understands how dangerous social media can be. It really is such a different world where everyone can be what they want. I was 16 at the time this story happened. I was still on MySpace. You know, typical teenage stuff. I was getting a few messages here and there, but there was this boy who was constantly texting me. I would answer him sometimes, the typical hello or what from 9, that kind of thing. I didn't think anything of it. One day, me and my friend caller Anna, we were walking around the city as usual. We stopped in the real estate complex near my house. Just to take a break, we were sitting on the stairs when a guy came up behind us and said to Anna, "Hey, you got a lighter?" She said no and he left. Then about 15 minutes later he came back and stood behind me. I started to see in my peripheral vision a movement of hands. So I turned around a little more and saw his hand in his pants moving up and down while facing me. My heart instantly rose in my stomach. I started running on my phone to text Anna. And I told him I thought he was touching himself. We both felt blocked. He then sat down next to Anna and he was so close that he touched her arm. I pretended to be on the phone to get him to leave. He looks at Anna and says, "Her name is Nadia." Anna got scared instantly and started screaming, "Ask him yourself," but I was still pretending to be on the phone. About 5 minutes later, the security guard walked around and he said hello to us. Then he spoke to the child, "Let's call the Antonio." "And what about Antonio? Are you hanging out with these ladies?" Tonight I knew this head had to be written on my face. Why can't he see it? The security guard then says, "Well, if I hear about 2 white girls going missing, I believe I know who to call at this point. I'm starting to feel sicker than I already was." The security guys then left, and yet Anna and I are still sitting there feeling more stuck than ever. A few minutes later, one of his friends came up and said, "Do you want to come in?" I finally had enough energy to say no, and that I had to go join my cousin before we started getting up. Antonio's friend stands in front of me and tells me, I said no, and Anna and I started walking towards the exit because my house is just up the hill, and what do you know, they both started following us. We go into this tunnel and Anna says, "Take your shoes off so we can run, and we don't want them to hear where we're going." So here we are, barefoot, running around like our lives depend on it. We go under my street, we run to my house, we go into the back hallway. It's so quiet that all you could hear was me, trying to catch my breath and my heart beating in my ears. I started looking at Anna, who was scared, hiding behind the wall, staring at the glass door, waiting to see if anyone was going to pop out. We ended up calming each other down. I thought it was all over until the next morning. When I went on MySpace, I had a message from him saying then, "I just want you to know. I know what house you live in with my street name listed then." I blocked him on MySpace and never drove past that complex again. A few weeks later, I found out he was in prison, and from what I know, now 25 years old, he is still in prison. I can only imagine what he did, but I really hope I never run into him again. Never again. It was a boring summer night. I had just finished school and had a lot of free time. I spent my days skateboarding with my friends at the park. Skating was my passion at the time, and I spent practically all my free time doing it. But some nights though, I got bored, I stayed home. I was never a big gamer, so watching my favorite series was my favorite hobby. But before the same your favorite series, the activities get boring after a few days. But one night in particular, I was thinking back to a conversation with a friend. My friend used to go to the Omegle site and try to play pranks on people. He often pretended to be a girl by putting on makeup very well done by his sister and boys. side of the screen was sometimes excited and compliment him. After playing with them a little, he would reveal his true gender and show his deep and manly voice. These stories my friend told were so hilarious that I decided to try Omegle myself. At first, I really wanted to meet people online and see where it would lead. I know it may sound cliché and too romantic, but I was a single man at the time. I had never been in a serious relationship before. I wanted to fall in love with someone. I wanted to get attached to someone. Unfortunately, Omegle disappointed me pretty quickly. Every time I tried to make conversation with someone, he would zap me. Sometimes I couldn't even say a word. I came to the conclusion that maybe he was only looking for girls on this page. After all the other guys who had their pants down and showed their private parts to the camera. I was shocked and disgusted at first, but after seeing something 10 times you're getting used to it. But at the time it was 11 p.m. I decided to drop the last few people and stop there. But as I was about to do so, I came across something I really didn't expect to see on my screen. The first thing I noticed was a large table with guns spread out, and behind it was a strange-looking man. My heart rate started to accelerate. I counted about 6 guns on the table. That was going on there. Why would someone show his weapons like that on Omegle? They had to be fake, right? As I pondered this question, I focused my attention on the man. His head was star-shaped and his face star-shaped. The room behind him was dark and I could see nothing but him and his weapons. The man sat motionless behind his desk, his eyes wide open. He had long black hair and his entire outfit was dark. Also, he was wearing some kind of gothic outfit. Even the skin around his eyes was painted black, almost like some kind of clown or joker. But on a grayscale, his lack of movement was starting to play on my anxiety. But somehow, I was waiting for him to start moving. After a long and embarrassing minute of staring at each other, he finally started typing something on his keyboard under the table. Curiosity would be a euphemism for how I felt at the time. I was really intrigued. For some reason, what could this guy be typing? The text said, "Hello. I choose you to choose my destiny. We are going to play the famous game called Russian roulette." But this version is a little modified on my table. Here I have 6 guns. 2 of them are fully loaded and the rest are empty. You'll decide which trigger I have to pull to aim my head. We'll do it twice, and what if I survive? I laughed out loud reading this post. I'm not an expert, but the weapons were clearly fake. He was trying really hard to make me believe this prank by thinking back to the stories of a friend of mine on Omegle. He also mentioned people doing stuff like that, so at that point I immediately knew it was a prank. And from my perspective, the weapons didn't look bright enough to look like real guns. I looked at the weapons and decided to go with the ones on the left. I texted him and he picked this gun. I was even more excited and intrigued and decided to go further. I was curious to see how far to park in his performance. He then showed the gun to the camera and clearly showed all the details that the real gun would have. I finally got to see the shine of the gun metal and was very impressed with the realism of the weapon. It must have been a movie pop. At least despite everything, I never considered, even in my wildest dreams, the possibility that these were real guns. He then put the gun to his head, closed his eyes and slowly pulled the trigger. The gun just clicked. At that point, I was 100% sure that they were either really good fakes or that everyone should be shooting. But they were empty. I was looking forward to picking out the next gun. I desperately wanted to show the man that I hadn't fallen for it. We then repeated the process. He asked me to choose a weapon, and I chose the middle one. He started shaking like a leaf. He pointed the gun at his head, but this time he couldn't get out. The next time it was very different. He was still shaking and it looked like he wanted to try and put down his gun. For a second, he hesitated to pull the trigger. It took him about 2 minutes to finally gather his courage. I didn't even blink at the very protruding at that time. I was just amazed at this man's game. His shaking and shivering seemed almost authentic. But then it happened. He pulled the trigger, and I could see his head come off. And a lot of blood squirting in the room. A few drops splashed the camera. Fortunately, it blurred the horrible view of what was left of his lower head, but even through the blood, I could see his muscles start to contract and spasm. After a few more seconds, they definitely stopped moving, so immediately averted their eyes. I thought it couldn't possibly be real. But I was beginning to believe they weren't pretending. The blood looked too real and there was no way this man had pretended to blow his head off. I closed my eyes and opened them several times to see if the body was still there. My anxiety attack was at its peak. Part of me was waiting for the man to move again, hoping it was some kind of 3D animation and the other was terribly facing reality. But his body never moved. I decided to stay on the page as long as possible to see if the body would at least be able to try. Something may be that someone in his home would walk into the room and quickly take him to a hospital. I was devastated, but at that point I started getting a stomachache. I rushed to the bathroom and started vomiting. I spent a good 20 minutes before I went back to my room and slowly reopened my computer. I just wanted to wake up from this nightmare. But that's when I realized I had just witnessed someone's suicide. I had the idea to scream into my microphone, or maybe alert someone in their apartment or house, try to unplug and see if it did anything. Maybe someone was around and could help. I tried to reopen at Omegle, but by that time Omegle had already assigned me a new stranger. So I decided to try to sleep, hoping to erase all this from my memory. I obviously couldn't do it. I couldn't help this man. Anyway, I didn't know his name or location after about a week. I buried that memory in the back of my mind. I never told my parents or anyone else. I tried to do it, but I didn't succeed. I was too ashamed, I was too scared, I was too embarrassed. 4 years later, I still think about this incident from time to time. Maybe if I had believed him, maybe if I had listened to him, I could have dissuaded him. But I can't change the past. I have to try to forget all this. There's nothing I can do. People often ask me why I'm paranoid when I go online, especially in this day and age. What I'm going to tell you should answer that question perfectly. This story took place about 3 years ago. It was a Friday night, and when I was normally supposed to be with friends, I found myself at home. It was a strange time of year. My friends seemed to be either busy or sick. Everything wasn't so terrible though. I know I'm not the only one who has done it from time to time. I appreciate having time for myself. I naturally jumped on my computer and started surfing the web. It wasn't very productive, but it helped me relax a lot. However, after 1 or 2 hours, my boredom started to peak. I didn't know what to do or which site to go to, but I remember the site my friends and I used to go to some time ago. Omegle had been around for quite some time now. But I hadn't been there in a long time. I thought the concept was a little silly at my age, but with all that, the boredom really started to get to me. I told myself to the devil. I opened to the megalas, and to my great astonishment, nothing had changed. It was as usual. I would meet random people by text or video. It really didn't have the same excitement as it did a few years ago. But I'm not really sure why the first person I bumped into had an almost contagious smile. His teeth were fully visible, and honestly, it caught me off guard. At first, needless to say, he seemed really happy about something. And that intrigued me for some reason. Not only was I trying not to ruin this man's really good mood, but I found it really interesting to see a smile like that. I said politely, trying to imitate him. There was a slight pause in the interaction. Then the smiling man said in a cold and seductive voice, "Well, hello, stranger. Normally I would have asked how you are, but you look like you're having a great day." I replied jokingly. The man chuckled and continued, "Life is too short to be unhappy. You never know when things may take a turn. Is it worth looking back and remembering only yourself frowning?" It took a really deep turn, but I guess the guy was right. There is no point in constantly sulking. Now do you want to meet a friend? The smiling man then made a person wearing a mask appear. The person looked tall and thin and the mask was white. The only thing I could see on the masked person was part of his eyes. But that wasn't even the scary part. The person whose mask seemed terribly limp, essentially the opposite of the smiling man. "Now there is no need to be afraid," said the smiling man, recognizing the shock on my face. "This is some kind of bad joke." Did I ask? "Come on, that's not how you treat someone you've just met," the man said. I remained silent. Part of me wanted to believe it was some kind of prank. But when the man's smile went from happy to sick, I knew something sinister was going on. My fear turned to irritation as the man continued to smile and hold this limp person on the screen. I took several screenshots and told the man to stop his joke, or else I will report him to the police. But the man continued to smile. Just as my hand was reaching for the escape button, the man stopped me. "Not so fast, you're really gonna try to talk your way out of it?" I asked the man angrily. The man continued with his crazy smile, and he placed a piece of paper in front of the screen. It was blurry at first, but I wiped my screen and let the webcam refocus. I was in shock. My face turned pale as I read the paper. Again, that was my address. A shiver ran down my spine. My adrenaline was running high. I had no idea what to do next. I kept making him patient. I hurried upstairs and made sure my entrance and exit doors were locked. Some of my shutters were open, but there were no other windows. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and ran to the nearest bathroom. I threw the chair I had against the bathroom door and tried to block it. I grabbed my phone and called the police. The police were busy with other things. It was late and it was Friday night. But they were going to try to send a unit to my house as soon as possible because of the nature of the emergency. But while the operator was on the phone with me, I heard my back gate open. This portal was never used. It was always locked. I asked the operator if the cops had arrived at my house yet. She told me that the nearest unit was still 5 or 10 minutes away. I finally made up my mind, opened the bathroom window and jumped over it. I landed in the least graceful way possible. The crunching of the leaves under my feet would certainly have alerted the intruder. It was now or never. I ran faster than I ever did. My more logical side told me that I should have at least looked back to see if he came alone or how he got to my house, but there was no turning back. After what seemed like several minutes of frantic sprinting, I finally arrived at an intersection. There were no cars or people at this hour. But at least I was at a traffic light with cameras and streetlights. I explained to the cops everything that happened when I arrived. I even showed them the screenshots. They were able to identify the man as someone who had just gotten out of jail for petty vandalism. They never suspected him of doing something like that. I asked them about the masked person and his health. They explained to me, but trying to keep a neutral tone, the dimension of the masked man seemed strange. He still didn't know if the person was unconscious or dead. On the video, the smiling man recorded my IP address. All the while it managed to trace packets of video back to my house. The police were still trying to figure out if it was the man himself or someone else who had come to my house. Our exchange was then interrupted by one of the investigators, who handed us a piece of paper in an evidence bag. The officer looked just as puzzled as I did. I asked, "What is it?" The police at first hesitated to show it to me. "Look, this is my house, okay? You need to show me what you're looking at right now," I answered angrily. The man then showed me the piece of paper and my heart broke. On paper you could read, "It was nice to meet you," with a smiley face at the end. In life, I've always been considered a pretty lucky person. But the story I'm about to tell you definitely changed that. I was a student in college, and at the time it was my second year. I consider myself an ordinary person. I just do what I have to do and lead a normal life. I had friends, good grades, and some hobbies. I was really a normal person. Knowing all this about me now, I really didn't expect traumatic things to happen. Ordinary people like me don't usually attract negative attention or drama. It was the weekend that continued the exams, and we were all thrilled. Our semester had been long and difficult. We were all ready to take a break. My friends and I had just congratulated our senior friends. They were graduating that year. We relaxed with the seniors, said goodbye, and went back to my room. At the time, my room was equipped with a big screen and speakers. This meant that my friends and I could often watch videos together online or do other things. That night, while we wanted to try Omegle was a weird site. It was either made up of young children or old men showing their bazaar in front of the camera. But sometimes, we also met nice people where we had fun trolling weird people. In the room were me, my friend Sophia, Lucy and Emily. We launched to the Omegles and started to parade people. At first nothing was out of the ordinary. There was only Emily and me parading, while Lucy and Sophia were in the background. We met the usual mix of weird and cool people, but it just felt like another night out with the girls. At one point, however, we met a fairly old man. It wasn't really well cared for and seems to be in a shabby room. I mean, he was close to 40, but none of that was really abnormal. It was just another creepy old man on the internet. The man examined my screen and started smiling weirdly. "What's that smile?" He looked a little further into the room and replied, "Oh, nothing, I was just a little bit of time online." At that point we were all on the same page. We were all thinking of weird and sarcastic things to say to him to make him uncomfortable. I mean, after all, Omegle was made to troll people. Pretty-haired Sophia noticed the man sarcastically. He seemed to have very uneven hair and was almost entirely bald on his head. "You are a fun young woman," to continue man. "But I'm more focused on what's behind you." We looked behind us and Lucy was in the street. Lucy was a very attractive young woman, and men he picked up randomly was something we were all too used to at this point. Without being impressed by the man's behavior, we replied with another sarcastic response. "Are you interested in what's behind us?" "You mean the office?" "Ah, it's just a regular desk. It came with a dorm. Do you like tables or something?" We all started laughing at Emily's comment, but the man smiled, continued his thought. "You are very funny, but I'm talking about the girl who is at the very bottom right." "Sorry, not interested," Lucy replied immediately. But the man continued, "Listen to me, young woman. You see, you've never had to deal with a real man. You don't know what real romance is, but I can show you." We all looked at each other in the absent air, then burst out laughing. We'd all had weird old men flirting with us online before, but this guy really thought he had a chance with Lucy. When we looked back at the screen, the man looked furious. His first smile was completely gone. He started talking about teaching him a lesson and made sure we understood that he was serious. At that point, we were done making fun of this man. We moved on to the next person, thinking what a bad loser he was. We had met some weird people before, but this guy really couldn't stand being rejected by a girl online. The next day I got a call from Emily. Apparently there had been a fairly decent-sized party to commemorate the end of the year. It took place the night before moving day, as usual, and it seemed to have a lot of success on social media. But this one was a little different. Normally, students find some kind of house or dormitory to host these parties, but the last parties that had done this had been stopped by the police pretty quickly, so when the cops showed up, the party was cancelled downstairs. In order to prevent that, they were going to have a party in the woods at a campground nearby. Most likely, as sketchy as it sounds, it wasn't actually abnormal. In our university, the university is close to a set of quite famous campsites. It was a bit close to the woods, and it was actually common for people to take some lights and a speaker on hiking trails out of town to have parties. It was a great way to avoid the noise, police complaints, and considering the fact that the party was spreading on social media like wildfire, we knew there would already be a lot of other people there, so really nothing to worry about. Knowing that this had already been done before, Lucy, Sophia, Emily and I quickly prepared for the party. We kept making fun of the man from earlier. We kept making fun of people online all the time. But his reaction was simply priceless. We drove to the forest and headed for the trail. It was late at night, but there were a lot of people. We finally stopped at the campsite, and there was already a fire in one of the stands. There were a lot of people and the music was already loud. We all went in and started talking to people. Lucy parted first and met a man. He was tall and wore a grey sweater. The guy was pretty cute, and I trusted Lucy's instinct to be safe. After all, we were surrounded by a lot of people. There wasn't much the guy could do. I found myself talking to a cute guy named Joey, who looked pretty cool. We ended up exchanging numbers on social media. Late, I started gathering everyone together so we could go back to our apartment. I didn't want to get there the next morning or anything. I managed to reach Sophie and then Emily a little later, but Lucy was nowhere to be found. I asked Joe if he'd seen her, but he had no idea where she was. Several minutes passed during which we searched the party and still haven't found her. We tried texting and calling her several times, but her phone kept going to answering machine. Lucy always picked up, especially when it was us. We searched even further and there was still no sign of her. Things were starting to get really scary. It was very late, and people were starting to leave the party, and despite the reduced number of people, we still couldn't reach Lucy. I tried to stay calm, but Sophie and Emily were really starting to panic. We wanted to assume she'd gone to some guy's house, but that still didn't explain why she wasn't picking up her phone. I even tried contacting her other friends to see if she was back on campus, but from what they told me, it didn't seem to be the case. Sophie, Emily and I reluctantly returned to our car. We wanted to see if she was waiting for us there, but to our horror she wasn't there either. We honestly felt like we were running out of options. By the end of the day, Lucy had mysteriously disappeared and was last seen in the woods. I was the most sober, so I dropped Sophie and Emily off at the university and drove to the police station. I made a report to the police, and in the meantime, Emily kept looking for Lucy in the university. As I told the police more and more about what had happened, they began to realize that it could be serious. They felt that this was motive enough to begin a full search for Lucy. There was nothing I could do, so I found Sophie and Emily at the university. We tried our best to sleep that night. The next morning, I got a call from the station. I picked up frantically to see if they had any news. I wanted to know where our friend was, what had happened to him, and let's just say my heart broke. Lucy had been found dead in the woods with multiple stab wounds to her body. His body was found not far from the party, in the forest. Police believe she may have been dragged into the woods in the dark, her screams drowned out by loud music and people. Sophie began to sob and Emily and I stood there, our faces pale with disbelief. The cops still hadn't found the culprit, but I felt I had a clue. I remember Lucy Fleur's time with this great man. I felt it had to be him, another horrible day to spend. And finally I was asked to go to the police station for a little more interrogation. Turns out they think they've found their culprit. I was furious. I was about to see the person who had taken my friend away from me forever. I realized that I may or may not have been in school with this man all this time. The thought disgusted me, but somehow, it was even worse than I thought. When they brought out the killer. It was the old man Dom Hegel. How did this man find us? How could all this have happened? But that's when it hit me. During the Miguel call, Lucy wore her badge from an event she had attended before. She was also wearing our school sweatshirt. The cops believed that the man had managed to find her on social media and find the party we were going to. And once he found her, he liked and commented on these posts on social media. It filled me with rage and despair from head to toe. This dirty online guy we're tangled with. He really lived up to his threats. I didn't even get to say goodbye to Lucy. I couldn't believe it. If there's one thing I wanted to take away from all of this, it's to be careful who you meet and who you make fun of online. Unimaginable things can always happen.